Hi, my name's Malis. A few months ago, my boss stood in front of 23 people, looked me in the eye, called my work garbage, and deleted a full year of client records I built from nothing. No warning, no explanation, just gone. The same clients who built our bottom line were reassigned to someone younger, flashier, someone who smiled while using my playbook. And the people I trusted? They said nothing. But the part that still keeps me up? They didn't want to fire me. They wanted me to walk out broken, quietly. So why did I get a job offer for $500,000 the very same day? Why did the clients follow me, not them? And how did silence become the sharpest weapon I never planned to use? Let me show you what happens when someone underestimates the wrong woman. They took me off the map without touching me. But I was wide awake now. Monday mornings at Piton were always brisk. People typing too loud, printers spitting out last-minute slides, coffee brewing, like it was the only thing keeping the building standing. I arrived early that day, like I always did. Habit, a shield. I didn't expect gratitude anymore, but I still believed in showing up ready. Until that morning. When I opened my inbox, I noticed the absence before the presence. No invitation to the retention strategy sync. No attachment labeled Q2 retention plan draft. I blinked, refreshed. Still nothing. I scrolled through the CC list of the team email. Vera, Isolde, Elowen. The entire group I helped build retention strategy with. Everyone except me. Did they forget me? Or was this deliberate? I hovered over the reply button, fingers stiff. I started drafting a message. Light, casual, like I wasn't choking on the omission. Hey Vera, just saw the thread on the Q2 sync. Should I loop in? I deleted it before finishing the question mark. I glanced around the office. Everyone else was buzzing about the meeting. I heard my name in passing. Someone mentioned my audit briefly, then moved on. Like I was a file they used, but no longer needed. Around 10, I walked to the copy room to avoid eye contact. I wasn't sad. Not yet. Just edged out. Quietly. Efficiently. By noon, the energy shifted toward the big quarterly alignment. Slides were being prepped. People rehearsed one-liners in the hallway mirrors. I sat in my usual seat in the conference room, third chair from the end. Then Vera walked in with her leadership face. You know the type. Smiling like she's already decided who matters. She motioned to Elowen, who scooted into the chair next to her. Mine. I stood, not saying a word. Found a different seat. No big deal, I told myself. And then the screen lit up. Client Success Leaders, Q1 Performance Highlights. Names and titles rolled down the screen, each accompanied by a corporate headshot. I waited, and waited. Then I saw it. Malis Cortland, Assistant Administrative Support. I didn't blink. Couldn't. I felt the blood drain from my hands. Not client relationship lead, not even coordinator, assistant, administrative support. They've demoted me without saying a word. What else have they changed? Someone behind me whispered, not quietly enough. I thought she was in client strategy, not admin? I didn't flinch, didn't correct. I kept my eyes forward and told myself I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me squirm. The rest of the meeting was a blur. Graphs. Praise. Names called. I clapped when others clapped, laughed when others laughed. But inside, I was rewinding every time Vera praised our efficiency initiative, knowing I built the bones of it. No one looked at me directly, except Isolde once. She blinked slowly, like she knew, but she didn't say a word. After the meeting, I lingered behind, letting the room empty out. My chair, no longer in the inner circle, sat pulled back, slightly crooked, like even the furniture had decided I didn't belong. I pulled out my phone, opened notes, typed what my mother once told me, after I didn't get promoted at my old job, even though I trained the guy who did. If they don't see your value, don't argue. Prove it so clearly, they'll choke on the loss. I didn't send it to anyone, just saved it. Then I stood, straightened my chair, and walked out like I hadn't just been erased in front of 23 people, They took me off the map without touching me, but I was wide awake now. 3 weeks earlier, they used to ask me to lead this meeting. Now I sat on the edge of the room like a guest in my own story. It was Wednesday morning, the regular project sync. I arrived early, out of habit more than duty. I'd always taken the same seat. 2 chairs down from Vera, close enough to speak, far enough to observe. But today, my nameplate wasn't there. It had been moved, without warning, without explanation. Instead, it sat at the far end of the room, next to the wall outlet where people usually leaned backpacks and rolling briefcases. Not a seat, a corner. Elowen, younger, newer, hair always perfectly pulled back, now occupied my usual spot. She looked up briefly when I paused, then turned back to her laptop as if I were a stranger walking into a dentist's waiting room. No greeting, no acknowledgement. I didn't ask. I just walked to the new spot and took my seat. I opened my notebook, uncapped my pen, pretended to be focused while watching the way the team bent slightly toward the center, where I no longer sat. They didn't fire me. They just moved me out of frame. The meeting started. Vera's voice carried through the room, equal parts performance and command. Her slides glided across the screen. Metrics, projections, phrases like nimble alignment and client-centered growth. I jotted nothing down. My eyes were on people. Halfway through, someone leaned toward me, Marcus from accounts. "Hey, didn't you used to sit up front?" he whispered. I looked at him, dry smile ready. Did I? He didn't ask again. During the mid-morning break, I stepped into the women's restroom. I didn't need to use it. I just needed air not curated by company values printed on the walls. That's when I heard it. The door wasn't fully closed, and voices filtered in. "She takes too long on calls," Vera's voice said, clipped, dismissive. "That's not scalable. Clients need quick answers, not birthday reminders." Then Isolde chimed in, sounding far away and too close at once. "Honestly, we need someone with energy, not sentiment." There was a pause, followed by the sound of running water. Then quiet laughter, like a door closing that I wasn't meant to hear shut. I stood frozen, hand tight around my phone. I didn't push the door. I didn't cry. I just listened until their voices disappeared, replaced by the drone of the air vent overhead. It was one thing to be sidelined. It was another to be reduced. I walked back into the conference room slowly, aware of the new layout like never before. My new chair wasn't just physically distanced, it was deliberately positioned outside the center of influence. Isolde glanced at me. Her eyes met mine for half a second, then darted away, like a child who dropped something and didn't want to be seen picking it up. I sat down without a word. I didn't speak for the rest of the meeting. I didn't need to. My silence was no longer passive. It was loaded. I opened my phone beneath the table and typed out a message. Not to anyone else. Just to myself. If they're betting on me staying quiet, they better hedge better. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have opened that folder. Today, I labeled it Maybes. It was Thursday afternoon, the kind of slow day when you can hear people's keyboards tapping like anxious ticks. I was in the middle of updating a quarterly vendor report. Nothing urgent, just another tedious task I'd been transitioned to after being benched from all client-facing work. My eyes drifted across columns of numbers I used to know by heart, scanning for inconsistencies. It should have been mindless work. But then I saw it. A footnote from 6 months ago, one I hadn't looked at since. Attached to it was a comment bubble with a name I hadn't thought about in weeks. Callum Rourke. "If things ever feel too tight where you are, give us a ring." At the time, I brushed it off. I'd been loyal, too loyal probably, still convinced that Vera would eventually see my methods were working. But now, that line hit different. It wasn't an offer. It was a door someone left cracked, just in case I needed to leave quietly. I leaned back in my chair, mouse hovering over the note. Then my memory kicked in. A year ago, I'd been asked to contribute insight on client engagement for a white paper Marlowe Partners was preparing. Vera passed it off as industry collaboration, said it would raise the company profile. I agreed without hesitation. I even stayed late to draft my section. Now I remembered. They never credited contributors by name. I opened a new tab and pulled up the published white paper. Scrolled through. There it was, my framework. Worded differently, sure, but the bones were mine. I exhaled through my nose, trying to steady my thoughts. I wasn't angry. Not in the screaming sense. More like, aware. Suddenly, too much made sense. Vernon had called me 3 months back, unprompted. Just a check-in. Or so I thought at the time. "You ever think about going solo?" He'd said, half joking. "You're the only reason I haven't switched firms." I'd laughed, told him I was happy where I was. But now pieces were falling together, like a puzzle I never meant to finish. I clicked into my inbox, searched Vernon. Dozens of emails popped up, but one from 4 months ago caught my eye. It was flagged. I don't remember doing that. Appreciate how you handled the last contract cycle. Still think you should be running your own table somewhere. My stomach tightened, not from fear, from the realization that I'd been groomed, not by Vera, but by my clients. Quietly, respectfully, the people I'd invested in had been watching me the whole time, even when the company chose to look away. They weren't just being polite, they were observing, tracking who kept clients, not who led meetings. I opened a folder on my desktop. It was titled Retention Survey Insights. I changed the name to Maybes. Then I added a new doc. Conversations, unfollowed threads. Inside, I started noting every instance where a client had circled back to me after being routed elsewhere. Barlow, Constance, the Hutchcraft Group. None of them reached out to Vera. None asked to speak with Elowen. They came to me, not because I held a title, but because I remembered their stories. Their daughter's first job interview, their anniversary trip to the Rockies, a dog's knee surgery. These weren't business transactions. They were bonds. I wasn't flattered. I was seen. And being seen after being erased, that does something to you. It doesn't swell your ego. It sharpens your focus. They've been grooming me for something bigger, I wrote in my notes. I was too loyal to notice. For the first time in a while, I didn't feel stuck. I felt ready, even if I didn't move yet. I wasn't ready to jump ship, not today. But I had one hand on the lifeboat and my eyes on the tide. I closed the tab, took a deep breath. I wasn't invisible. I was just being watched by the right people. It didn't matter if I had a title. My work had fingerprints they couldn't erase. Monday started with the kind of chill that crawls under your collar. Not from the weather, but from what you already knew was coming. I parked in the same spot I always did, nodded at the security guard like I always did, and walked past the front desk with the same strained smile. Routine is comforting, even when the rug is already halfway pulled out from under you. When I got to the team bulletin board, the digital screen near the elevators, I paused. Noticed a new schedule layout, a revised departmental breakdown. At first glance, it looked normal. Then I saw it. Under Internal Metrics and Admin Research, my name. No bolded text, no fanfare. Just tucked beneath a list of names I'd never worked with, buried like an afterthought. No one told me, no meeting, no memo. Just reassigned, quietly, neatly. I made my way to my desk and opened my laptop. The shared calendar no longer had me included on client strategy calls. Even the client pulse report folder, the one I'd built from scratch, no longer granted me editing access. Minutes later, Vera walked past with her coffee and that feigned warmth she always pulled out when she was cornering someone politely. I spoke first. I noticed my role is now listed under support. I wasn't informed. She didn't blink. Oh, we thought that would be a better fit while the client teams evolve. You're so thorough with details. It's really a compliment, Malis. She smiled like she was handing me a bouquet. What she really delivered was a shovel. I nodded once, turned back to my screen, and acted like her words meant something. They hadn't fired me, but they'd made it clear. I was no longer part of the direction. I was the ballast they were preparing to drop to stay afloat. By mid-afternoon, the air in the office was thick with artificial calm. I knew something else was coming. I just didn't expect her to sit next to my desk again so soon. Vera approached like a neighbor dropping off banana bread. "I wanted to ask," she said, setting her coffee down. "Do you feel aligned here?" I didn't look up. Just let her voice fill the gap between us. "Sometimes environments shift," she continued, "and that's okay. If you ever feel this isn't where you shine anymore, it's okay to explore elsewhere. No judgment. Just want what's best for you." It wasn't a conversation. It was a push disguised as kindness. I finally looked at her, smiled. "Thanks," I said calmly. "I'll consider that. When the numbers stop working." Her smile tightened. She didn't have a follow-up line for that. She left quietly, her shoes tapping a little faster than when she arrived. I stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. They wanted me out, but they didn't want to be the ones to say it. The strategy was clear: make me feel like I didn't belong until I walked myself out. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the office I used to feel proud to walk into. They didn't just want my resignation, they wanted it clean. No HR meetings, no severance. Just me, fading out quietly. "They want me to doubt myself loud enough to walk away quietly," I muttered. I didn't. Not then. I didn't pack up, didn't erase my files, didn't say goodbye to anyone. I sat there like nothing had happened. And when I saw my name removed from the project tracker board at 4:37 p.m., I didn't blink. I kept typing. Let them pretend I was gone. Let's see how long they can pretend I'm not here while still using everything I built. The real reward of silence is watching who panics when you finally start moving. Monday came again, and with it, a fresh sting. I was at my desk early, pretending the weekend hadn't happened, pretending the subtle erosion of my responsibilities hadn't shifted into a full-fledged excavation. My name was gone from every client call, my access rights reduced to view only across most folders. Still, I showed up. If they wanted to erase me, I wasn't going to make it easy. Around 9:12, the internal newsletter pinged into my inbox. I almost deleted it out of habit, but something told me to read it this time. The banner at the top read, "Team Excellence, Celebrating Client Retention Heroes." I scrolled. There was Elowen's photo, beaming beside a quote about engagement innovation. Constance Farweather's case study was referenced, one I personally managed from onboarding to expansion. The Hutchcrafts were listed as a legacy client, applauded for their 18-month contract renewal. My case, my rapport, my follow-through, my name, absent. Not even a footnote. I stared at the screen, didn't blink, didn't sigh. Across the aisle, one of the newer guys leaned toward me. "Didn't you handle Vernon Hutchcraft's account last year?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Still do," I replied, eyes still on the screen. He looked down like he'd stepped in something he didn't know was there. I took a screenshot, opened my personal folder labeled Receipts, and dragged it in. At lunch, I headed down to the cafe, more for habit than hunger. I spotted Isolde across the room. We used to sit together every Monday. Salads, inside jokes, the occasional vent session about mismanaged rollouts. Now she sat with Vera and Elowen. She saw me. I know she did because her body tensed, hand pausing mid-laugh. Our eyes met. She smiled. That awkward, polite smile people give you when they hope you won't come over. Then she turned back to her table, laughing at something Vera said. I didn't feel hurt, not in the "how could you" kind of way. It was more like confirmation, final. It hurts when people turn on you, but it hurts worse when they simply vanish without a word. I picked a table by the window, ate half a sandwich, and pretended not to notice when Isolde checked if I was still looking. That night, around 8:40, I got a Slack message. From her, Isolde D. Hey, sorry I didn't say hi earlier. Just didn't want things to feel weird. I stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute. Then I typed back. Me. They already are. You just made sure of it. No typing bubbles followed. No reply. I closed my laptop, set it on the kitchen counter, and opened the window. Cool air filled the room. It didn't change anything, but it helped me breathe. Back at work the next day, I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The newsletter had said enough. I walked by my old team's pod, caught a glimpse of the printed bulletin taped to the wall. Elowen's face looked back at me from the laminated printout. Client Whisperer, it read. Cute. Back at my desk, I took out a sticky note and wrote a new line I'd been thinking about since Sunday. Don't chase chairs at tables where you're the meal. I stuck it to the inside of my drawer, closed it gently. Then I pulled up my Google Drive, opened the Maybes folder, renamed it Moves. They erased me publicly, so I'll rebuild privately. Sometimes you don't need to shout your value. You just need to let them delete it, so they notice what disappears. The quarterly strategy summit landed on a Wednesday this time. Vera loved a midweek audience. Less Monday scramble, more time for controlled narratives. The conference room was fuller than usual, filled with folding chairs lined against the walls, bodies shoulder to shoulder. Leadership, account managers, even HR showed up in blazers that hadn't seen sunlight since the last annual review. I was told 2 days prior that I'd be presenting highlights from our client retention audit. Your report's a great example of what we can build on, Vera had said, with that glassy-eyed smile of hers. I didn't trust it, but I prepared anyway, because preparation was armor. I'd cleaned the visuals, trimmed the footnotes, but kept the stories. The actual details clients had shared with me. Their losses, their milestones, their gratitude. At 9:47 a.m., Vera stood at the front of the room and clicked her remote. Today we'll be reviewing our client relationship approach and discussing inefficiencies. Her tone was syrupy, almost maternal. Then she gestured toward me. Maelis will walk us through her documentation. I stood, plugged in my laptop, and let the screen fill with the work I had carried on my back for a year. Graphs, feedback snippets, renewal data tied to specific client conversations, where empathy had made the difference. It was factual. It was measurable. Halfway through my second slide, Vera raised her hand slightly. Let's pause here. I stopped talking. She took the remote from my hand, then addressed the room. I think what we're seeing is exactly the problem, she said, flipping through the slides like they were cluttered receipts. These notes, they're inefficient. Conversations about dogs, farmers markets, birthday plans, that's not scalable. She laughed gently, the kind of laugh that tells a room it's okay to join her. This isn't client management, she added. This is therapy. I didn't move. She clicked one more time, highlighted a folder tab on the shared drive, labeled Retention Audit, M. Cortland. This approach is garbage, she said with finality, and then clicked Delete. The folder disappeared. Starting today, we reset. Professionalism only. No one spoke. 23 colleagues watched, silent, some blinking fast, others staring down at their notes. Isolde didn't look at me. Elowen tilted her head, almost curiously, like she'd seen someone accidentally knock over a glass and was waiting to see who'd clean it up. I didn't cry. I returned to my chair, opened my laptop, and stared at my empty desktop. Everything gone, publicly, erased with a click. The meeting went on, of course. Bullet points, objectives, coffee refills. I sat still until the room cleared, then unplugged and walked out like I hadn't just had my work burned in front of a crowd. Later that afternoon, I passed by Vera's office. Her door was slightly open. I heard her voice. Elowen, use that retention framework, but trim the emotional stuff. Make it presentable. So that's what it was. They weren't deleting the work because it didn't work. They were deleting my name from it. It hit me then. This was never about refinement. It was removal. I went back to my desk and opened my synced server backup. The folder was still there. Everything they thought they'd deleted lived in my drive. I renamed it, When They Clap While You Burn. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a warning. My work wasn't broken. It just didn't belong to the right person anymore. Some people don't want better results. They want control over who gets credit. At 6:12 p.m., I packed my bag slowly. Before leaving, I walked past Vera's office again. She was laughing with Isolde and Elowen, a trio of matching smiles over after-hours wine. I paused, watched, and I smiled too. Not from anger, from clarity. If they wanted a clean slate, I'd give them one. With my name chiseled into the base. If quiet is what they wanted, then they'll have no idea what's coming next. By the following Thursday, the hallway outside Vera's office felt less like a corridor and more like a stage. The doors were always half open now, laughter leaking out at just the right decibel to remind everyone who was thriving on this side of the building. I was walking past when Elowen stepped out, clutching a printed email, highlights bleeding through the paper like bruises. I recognized the chart at a glance. It was from my retention audit, the same one Vera deleted 2 weeks ago in front of a live audience. Inside, I heard Vera's voice, unfiltered and purposeful. Use her logic. Ditch her style. Another pause. We can reframe it through Elowen's voice. Younger energy resonates more. Elowen nodded, smiling tightly, like she was holding in something she didn't earn. By noon, the internal comms team had pushed out a video spotlighting the next-gen client engagement strategy. The face on the screen was Elowen's, polished and glowing, in front of a neutral background. The words, mine. Phrases I'd handcrafted over months, now rolled off her tongue like freshly minted ideas. I didn't react right away. Then I heard the ping. A private message from a colleague popped up on my screen. Didn't you design that tiered engagement funnel? I stared at it for a second before typing, I did. They just deleted my watermark. That afternoon, while sifting through backlog emails, I saw one forwarded by accident from operations. A long chain. At the top, Vera's name. She had written, let her burn out naturally, don't confront, just reroute key functions. When she disengages, we'll have cause. I read it twice, then again. I didn't shake, I didn't respond. I downloaded it, saved it in the moves folder. So that's what this was. Psychological sabotage in stilettos and shared drives. Not fire, not ice. Just omission. Gradual, intentional, designed to make me question whether I was the one unraveling. They don't want war, I wrote in my notebook later. They want me to collapse, quietly and on record. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I didn't toss either. Instead, I started rebuilding, my way. From memory, I pulled up every client's core metrics, names, contract cycles, preferred contact days, birthdays, even the name of Vernon's Labrador and Constance's favorite cafe near the airport. I didn't need Peaton's files. They were all still in my head, because I had never seen them as accounts. I'd seen them as people. I cross-referenced every outreach initiative I had initiated. Then I created a new database. Private, clean, strategic. I encrypted it, saved it locally, backed it up twice. Label, quiet weapons. As the sun started rising, I scribbled something into my planner before closing it for the night. The only thing scarier than someone working hard is someone working silent. By Friday afternoon, my work was complete. The folder sat quietly behind layers of authentication, and yet it felt more real than anything on Peaton's server. Not because of the data, but because this time it was protected. From them. I picked up my phone, opened my text thread with Callum Rourke, typed, "We might need to talk sooner than planned." Hit send. They built a fire around me. Now I'll choose how long I stay warm. It wasn't the silence that hurt. It was what they did while I stayed quiet. The strategic leadership review came a week later. Company-wide video call, split screens full of executives, marketing leads, and, most telling of all, clients. Not prospects, real ones. The ones who had stuck around. The ones who remembered who used to call them, not just what they paid for. Vera was in her element, polished and loud, leading the presentation with slides titled Evolution of Client Strategy. The narrative was clear. Peyton had matured, thanks to new voices. Like Elowen. I sat 2 rows back, muted and still. Callum had told me, "Wait, let them perform first." So I waited. Halfway through the presentation, Vera proudly transitioned to a slide labeled Client Framework V2, layered with colors and engagement tiers. This approach, she said, was reimagined by our own Elowen, based on fresh client insight and scalable empathy. My Slack pinged. It was from Constance Farweather. "This looks familiar. Didn't you pitch this exact thing to us last year?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my personal folder labeled Quiet Weapons. In it, an audio file from 6 months ago, me, presenting the exact retention model during a roundtable strategy call, timestamped, crystal clear. I double-checked the metadata, pulled the call transcript, and attached it to an email addressed anonymously to the board's archive inbox. Subject: for record-keeping purposes. Body: attribution matters. No signature, no traceable breadcrumbs, but enough. The meeting continued. Vera beamed as she wrapped up. Applause echoed in the call. Then came the moment that felt like wind changing direction mid-sentence. Avery Trent, one of the more observant board members, unmuted himself. "Before we wrap, can we confirm the origin of the tiered framework? I saw a submission linked to Milas from a previous cycle." Vera blinked. "Oh, well, this version is an evolution. It draws on several ideas that floated through internal sessions." Avery nodded slowly. "Understood. The time-stamped material we received aligns closely with what's been presented today." No one spoke. I didn't flinch. I just closed my laptop, slid it into my bag, and stood up. Elowen caught up with me near the elevator. "I didn't know they'd use your exact stuff," she whispered. "I thought they rewrote it." I turned to her. Calm, not cruel. "It was never about you," I said. "But thanks for confirming." That night, back at home, I opened the full audit I'd written, the one Vera deleted weeks ago. I signed it digitally, dated it, encrypted it, and uploaded it to a professional ledger that tracked intellectual property claims. Not for revenge, for truth. I didn't need them to say they were wrong. I just needed a future where they couldn't keep pretending I didn't build what they stood on. Let them find out later. I'm already somewhere else. It wasn't just about who stayed. It was about who followed, and why. The ripple didn't come loud. It never does when power shifts for real. Monday morning, Vera stepped into the operations briefing with a forced brightness that was almost exhausting to watch. She dropped her tote next to the head seat and cleared her throat with that stage-ready polish. "We had a few client reviews come in late Friday. Nothing urgent," she announced, like a waitress downplaying a fire in the kitchen. But I already knew better. An hour earlier, I'd received a discreet message from someone in HR. Subject line: Client Transition Notice. Internal eyes only. The content was short, factual. Client: Barlow Industries. Action: Service disengagement effective immediately. Noted: Loyalty concerns regarding staff change. I read it twice. Then once more for the sting. They hadn't left because of the product, or the pricing, or even the pitch. They left because I was gone. And I wasn't the only one noticing. By Wednesday, 3 more familiar names were flagged in quiet status updates. They weren't loud about their exit. No lawsuits, no confrontations. Just gone. Like they'd slipped out the back door and left the lights on behind them out of courtesy. It wasn't a client exodus. It was an emotional migration. They were following the person who'd remembered the details. The daughter's scholarship, the dog's surgery, the husband's knee replacement after the ski accident he swore wasn't his fault. They were never just clients to me, and I'd never been just a line item to them. That Friday, I attended a consulting summit in Raleigh, quietly invited by Callum and the Marlowe team. I was listed on the guest roster as independent advisor. It was the kind of title you use when you're almost something else. I stayed in the back row during the keynote on client loyalty trends, listening more than I spoke. Then the moderator introduced a panel of business owners, and my breath caught when I saw Constance Farweather walk up to the microphone. Constance ran a textile firm we'd serviced for years. She was sharp, no frills, the kind of client who didn't give praise often, but when she did, you listened. She shared her metrics, nodded politely through standard questions, then paused. "There was someone at Peton," she said, looking directly at the crowd, "who remembered our company's founding anniversary before anyone else did, sent us a handwritten card, followed up the next quarter without being asked. That kind of attention doesn't come from strategy decks." She didn't need to say my name, but she did. Malis Cortland. Heads turned. I didn't smile, just let the room sit in it. Callum leaned toward me and whispered, "We didn't plan that." I whispered back, "The best truths never need prompting." By Monday, the recording had made its way to Peton's executive inboxes. Someone in marketing forwarded it to an internal Slack thread. Vera's name didn't come up once in the client praise. By Tuesday, she stopped making eye contact in the hall. No memo went out, no formal statement. But there was a shift. The whispers didn't come from staff anymore. They came from the boardroom. And that's the kind of whisper that breaks things. That evening, I received a calendar invite from Avery Trent. Subject: Private. Client Retention Attribution Audit. No body text, no attachments, just a date and time. Discreet, calculated. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. The file was already ready. The ledger had the timestamp, the voice memo, the client names, the lost trail. When people start speaking your name again, some stories can't be rewritten anymore. They wanted me back, but only because the version without me stopped working. 3 days after the summit clip of Constance went quietly viral inside the company Slack, I received a formal email from Avery Trent. Subject: Let's discuss future opportunities. Short, respectful, curious. The next morning, I found myself sitting in a quiet boardroom on the 3rd floor of Peton Analytics. No PowerPoints, no HR present. Just Avery, a notepad, and a sealed carafe of water. Too formal for a casual check-in, too sparse for a real negotiation. "We believe there's been a gap," Avery said calmly, not looking at notes. "A misunderstanding of impact. We'd like to correct that." I waited. "You'd have full autonomy, lead the client experience division, director title, compensation package reflects the oversight, effective immediately if you accept." No Vera in sight. Her absence said more than Avery's entire pitch. I let the silence stretch. Finally, I answered, "I appreciate the offer, truly, but I've built something else, and they never asked me to prove myself." Avery nodded, lips pressed tight. He knew. It was too late. We stood. He extended a hand. I shook it. Then I left the building without looking back. At Marlowe the next day, I was reviewing new intake procedures when HR pinged me with a note. "Interesting submission came in today." It was Elowen's resume. There it was. Clean layout, confident bullet points, curated phrases about leading innovation and managing retention structures. My words in new clothes. I didn't say anything, just forwarded it to the hiring panel. Later that afternoon, during a staffing sync, one of the managers leaned toward me. "You worked with her, right? Would you recommend?" I closed the file, looked him in the eye. "I recommend we don't recycle what didn't work." The subject was dropped. That night, I updated my professional page with a quiet addition. Now hiring, empathy-led strategists ready to listen before they pitch. No hashtags, no names. But anyone paying attention would know exactly what it meant. Sometimes your silence walks into rooms before you do, and answers questions you never needed to say out loud. Just before bed, I checked my messages. A junior staffer from Piton had DM'd me on LinkedIn. "I just want you to know, a lot of us saw what happened. We never forgot." I stared at it for a while, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed, "Thank you. That's more than I ever got while I was there." I didn't win because I fought louder. I won because I outlasted the lie. I didn't answer him. I just sat there, grateful someone still remembered why I stayed so long in the first place. The next morning, I arrived at Marlowe's office before the sun crept past the high-rises. It was quiet in the building. Cleaners' carts still lined the hallway, and the elevator music hadn't been switched off yet. I settled into my corner desk with coffee from the bakery downstairs, opened my laptop, and started editing the quarterly report. Numbers always grounded me. They didn't pretend. They didn't smile to your face while erasing your name behind your back. Around 10:14, my inbox pinged. Subject: Hello again. Sender: Barlow, Thomas. It took me a second to place the name. Then I remembered. Mr. Barlow, the widower who had canceled a quarterly review last year because his wife had passed. I'd sent a handwritten note with a pressed dogwood blossom inside. The only client I hadn't followed up with since leaving Piton. Not because I didn't care, because I assumed I wasn't part of his life anymore. His email was only 2 sentences. "Just saw your new article. My wife always said real professionals are the ones who remember what makes us human. You never forgot." I didn't move. Let the message just sit there, radiating something deeper than praise. He found me. Without prompting, without a pitch. This wasn't about business anymore. It was about the part of the job no one taught, paying attention to people when no one else was watching. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I closed my screen, grabbed my notebook, and took the elevator up to the rooftop patio. It was cool out, windy. A leaf skittered across the pavers as I sat down on a bench by the railing. I opened the notebook and flipped to a clean page. I wrote slowly, deliberately. "I'm not rebuilding to prove anything. I'm rebuilding because this time, I get to choose the foundation." I didn't feel angry anymore, or even bruised, just clear. The storm had come and passed, and I was still standing, without bitterness weighing me down. That afternoon, a friend forwarded me a screenshot from Piton's internal form. Anonymous post, but I knew the tone. The person we lost wasn't just an asset. She was the anchor. We chased efficiency and lost connection. I hope we learn before we burn more bridges. I didn't reply. Didn't share it. Just saved the image into a folder I'd named Closure. Later that night, I opened a draft in my email folder. The last message I'd ever written to Vera. It was never sent, never meant to be. It started with, "I hope one day you realize what you destroyed." I hovered over the delete button for a long moment, then clicked. Some endings don't need confrontation. They just need release. The next morning, I came into the office and opened the window near my desk. The air smelled like early spring, clean, a little green, and nothing like the conference room carpet at Piton. Some people forget you because they can. Others remember you because you mattered. It turns out, the best revenge was never needing revenge at all, just results that spoke louder. 2 months later, I stood backstage at the Marlowe Partners Client Symposium, sipping lukewarm coffee from a compostable cup and listening to the steady hum of chairs being arranged and name tags being checked. The ballroom was packed with more navy suits than fresh ideas, but I wasn't there to impress. I wasn't a keynote. I was the host for the client panel, a low-profile role that meant I asked questions, introduced speakers, and let others take the spotlight. That was fine. I'd learned how powerful quiet could be. Midway through the morning, I introduced a familiar name to the stage, Vernon Hutchcraft. He gave a warm nod, adjusted his cufflinks, and took the mic like he had nothing to prove. That's the thing about clients who know their worth. They speak in truths, not scripts. During the Q&A, a junior consultant, eager, maybe a little too rehearsed, asked, "Mr. Hutchcraft, what do you value most in a long-term consulting relationship?" Vernon paused. "Not for effect. For meaning." "Anyone can solve problems," he said. But only Malus remembered my dog's surgery. Only she followed up when my wife had a hip replacement. That's why we followed her here. The room quieted. I didn't move, didn't smile, just let the weight of his words land. The applause that followed was restrained, but real, not polite, earned. Back at Piton, word spread fast. The symposium had been recorded, uploaded, and clipped within an hour. I didn't have to ask. Someone forwarded me the internal email chain later. Do we have context for this? Why wasn't this loyalty retained? By the end of that week, client retention had dropped below the break-even threshold. Contracts that once renewed automatically were now under review. The churn wasn't noisy. It was consistent, measured. I knew the rhythm. It was the sound of loyalty gone unrecognized too long. Vera wasn't in the office the following Monday. By Wednesday, the memo came. Restructure initiated. Head of client operations not retained. The phrase was sterile. So was the outcome. I didn't gloat. I didn't even mention it. Instead, I updated our company's mission statement online. Real loyalty isn't tracked in dashboards. It's earned in moments that can't be taught. The quote picked up steam on client social feeds, quiet endorsements from people who'd been there when it counted. That night, I opened a drawer at home I hadn't touched in a long time. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My original resignation letter to Piton, dated but never sent. I read it once, folded it in half, and took it out to the balcony. I placed it in a metal tray, struck a match, and watched the flame take it gently. No drama, no tears. I wasn't escaping anymore. I was already gone, already living a life I built without permission, on my own terms, with people who never needed a title to trust me. They deleted the file, but they couldn't delete the story I'd already written in the lives of those who mattered.